Howdy, all of you delicious people. I'm here today to review I, Robot. I, Robot actually was one of the films that I got to see in a drive-in at one point because I never went to a drive-in before. And this was like years before even like The Cove and stuff like that happened. It was just like, hey, I'd never been to a drive-in before. It's like, hey, these two movies are showing. Let's go. Let's see what like a drive-in experience has to offer us, oddly enough. So, and it was okay. It was like I was just like, yeah, why why would you go to a drive-in, especially like scrunching down the whole time trying to watch a film just seems weird. uh I don't know, just like, man, let's go to a theater if we can. uh and that was the time where we would like consistently go to a theater at some points for special films. So, but no offense to that, to either one of those movies, The Day After Tomorrow or I, Robot. It was just like, it was probably the whole drive-in part of it. It wasn't like because they were good movies. It was just, anyways, pushing on. I would honestly say that probably top fiving it. I, Robot probably has to be the top five one of my favorite Will Smith movies, and that's kind of easily to say, simply because I would say like Suicide Squad or uh, probably I Am Legend or possibly um, there's probably another one in there. Not Independence Day, not Men in Black. Um, there's probably another one in there. I'll figure it out eventually. But anyways, easily just a great film. If not better than that, it does have rewatchability. Just because you're trying to put the connections together, you're putting the pieces together. This movie is a mystery noir futuristic film, of course, with these things called robots in it. And a lot of people would quickly and immediately rattle off their favorite robot film concerning the title. This movie, of course, does have like that kind of Terminator kind of feel. If not, I think probably Rise of the Machines could easily be the one to kind of throw in there to just say like, oh yeah, this feels just like Rise of the Machines. Um, so, what is to go on in this film? We have a detective who is to be Will Smith, who is to be Del Spooner, and Spooner goes on and he is to be this overly paranoid detective who is to be very suspicious of robot kind. And there's a whole reason for that. There's a whole story connected to that, which we find out later in the film. So, Spooner goes on and is to realize that his suspicion is to actually be a thing that is to becoming true. And so Spooner becomes the right man for the right job, and Spooner is kind of off put by that. It's like, well, wait a minute. Like, I had to be that guy. Why? And so we have Spooner consistently trying to pull at more threads, figuring out more things within the story, to come to find out that there seems to be more than one defective robot. And so, really, I could quickly compare this movie also to a Tubi movie that's conveniently on Tubi right now called Automata or Automata. It's a Antonio Banderas film, and this movie, of course, would be similar to iRobot, but it does have some very interesting special effects. It doesn't look exactly like it's not as seamless as iRobot is, but it kind of does have an interesting story, even though it's kind of a slow slog of a thing. Uh, but like the thing that I like about Automata is it has like these interesting visuals. Like you have these big, massive, uh, 3D characters that are being like infused in parts of the town and stuff like that. It's kind of cool. But anyways, so with that said, yeah, let's just kind of go into the spoilers of iRobot. I know I'm kind of all over the place already. It's first freaking 5 minutes. And so, like, for those of you that have probably heard the song and dance about iRobot, um, definitely it's a positive review easily, just because, like, I have seen this movie, like, tons and tons of times, and more than likely I probably won't even get it in perfectly with all what happens within this film, but I'm going to try to do my best to hopefully talk about this film the best I can. Just because there's so many moving parts in this film, and there's so like many things that have to connect with one another perfectly, or the whole puzzle of it all may not ravel in perfect uh, way of things. But anyways, I think it's about that time to just go into spoilers about this one. Let's go out of our way to say that it's about that time yet again to just talk about this movie and just say that it is spoiler time. Spoiler time. It's about that time we get to spoil this movie. Uh, before I go, let me know how you feel about iRobot. Maybe you might not like. Maybe this is your least favorite Will Smith movie, um, which is surprising because some people may not have like seen certain Will Smith films. Not all of them are home runs, if you know what I mean. But uh, a lot of people would go on and find like really interesting Will Smith movies and just be like, oh wow, like this feels like the hidden gem of Will Smith movies, and it's good that I watched this, and it's good that I enjoyed this, and so on and so forth. So, with that said, let's go into spoilers. So, Spooner is to have this dream, and so he's to wake up desperately wanting to get that dream from out of his head. We also, in the very beginning of like the credits, or the kind of the beginning credits of this film, of course, are they're telling us the three laws of robotics. The first rule of Fight Club is you don't talk about Fight Club, but the first rule of robotics is we of course have a robot who is to be ordered to not harm a human being. And the second rule is to take orders from a human being as long as the order does not conflict with the first law. And then the third law states that a robot can defend itself or like protect its own livelihood as long as it still doesn't conflict with the second or first law. So, yeah. So, with that said, like I said, Will Smith Spooner is having this dream, and I will explain the dream right here and now, even though it kind of comes up later in the film. So, because this is a flashback, and Spooner is being haunted by this dream. So, we find out that Spooner is to have been in a car accident with some little girl named Sarah. The cars are pinned together, and both of them end up in this water, and Spooners immediately think that everyone's going to be dead. All of a sudden, we have a NS4 who is to come to the rescue of these people, and this NX this NX NS4 had decided to go on and save Spooner instead of Sarah. Spooner, I guess, afterwards is to know every single bit about this girl named Sarah, even to the point of Spooner getting this necklace that Sarah was to wear. So Spooner is to ask the NS4 why he went on and saved him instead of the girl, because Spooner was yelling to save the girl. And the NS4 was mentioning that there was a more likable chance that Spooner was to be saved instead of this girl. So there's a whole percentage chance. And so Spooner goes on and is to say that these robots are all light and clockwork and percentages and garbage and whatever calculations, and like really when it comes down to it, that girl should have been saved. So that's the whole reasoning for the suspiciousness of Spooner. Kind of did that early, but it is what it is. So Spooner goes on and is to, of course, take a shower, is to go on, do some lifting with some weights. So Spooner is to also unbox these Converse that are to be from 2004, mentioning that it's a thing of beauty. We have Superstitious, the Stevie Wonder song playing in the background, which is kind of funny because we have, of course, Spooner, who is to be a very paranoid character. So it's like superstitious. It's like, okay. But yeah, so Spooner, of course, is to go on and make his way to a uh, a relative of his who he calls Gigi, and so I guess Gigi is to consistently make this guy pies, Spooner pies, and so Gigi or Granny is to mention that she wants to go on and win the lottery so she can get one of those new robot models. And Spooner is like, no, like, don't trust those things. And so Gigi is talking to Spooner about a previous love that he is to have and lose. And Spooner is just consistently nodding off, like, huh? What? She's like, I know you're listening to me. So he's like, what? So, of course, we have Gigi asking Spooner about these shoes, which, of course, are Converse, and they're from 2004. Honestly, I have had a shoe that is like a Converse. Not very comfortable, especially when you're to go on and if you're probably like if you're playing basketball and like those are the shoes that you're choosing to play basketball with, they might be pretty good shoes. But if you're going on and walking anywhere else with those shoes, they freaking suck. You feel everything. Like, especially if, like, for example, if you're just going on and like walking in a park, like, man, are you just going to feel everything? Hopefully, there is no pebble or rock or whatever that's to be any part of your path because you're going to feel everything. It's going to be so uncomfortable. Hence why, I tried to get those for a while, but then I'm just like, no. I think I kind of had like a cruddier version of Converse kind of shoes. They're like Airwalks or whatever, but still, like, those soles were so thin, and I'm like, no, like, I definitely want like some thick sole shoes, and so really they definitely weren't going to be Converse for me. So moving on, just an example of like, those shoes look really cool, but they're not comfortable. They're not, and plus they don't last that long either. So, moving on. Uh, Spooner goes on and he is to just make it to his work as well as with a weirdly pie on his hand. So, Spooner is to see a robot just running with a purse, and somebody's like, "Hey, robot, you doing some running?" Spooner all of a sudden is to be very suspicious, thinking that this robot is stealing this purse. And so Spooner, of course, is to tell this guy to hold on to his pie. It's like, hey man, you either hold on to it or you wear it. Funny thing of it is, I don't think Spooner ever goes back for his pie because he probably forgets completely where this guy is. So Spooner runs off to get this NS4 and that is to be running with this purse. Spooner goes on, grabs the robot, they go sliding, and come to find out the reasoning for this android running with this purse is simply because this woman was to desperately need this inhaler, and the robot was going and running from this home to deliver this to her. So, we also had Spooner that was dealing with this FX NS4, and Spooner just like takes the head and like pushes it aside, and he just kind of walks off, kind of telling us that he does not like robots. But I think kind of after iRobot, we kind of had a number of movies where you had characters that were kind of paranoid of certain things or distrusting of certain things to probably come to find out that they would eventually become true. Like, you probably don't have the whole Utopia comic book show if not for probably like some paranoia going on from certain shows or certain series and movies and stuff like that. So, but pushing on. So, Spooner is to make his way to the office, and we of course have his lieutenant that is telling Spooner, it's like, so do we have to kind of get into what happened? And Spooner's like, well, hey, I saw a robot running with a purse. I just made some conclusions. And Lieutenant is like, well, yeah, but like nothing happened. And so Lieutenant is even telling Spooner, it's like, maybe you should probably take some time off. And Spooner's like, no, I'm perfectly fine. I can work. So Lieutenant's like, okay. So Lieutenant at some points is just to kind of like joke around with Spooner. Uh, will at some point get to the Wolfman dialogue, which I kind of find is really funny. Um, we'll get to that soon. So, Spooner, of course, is to do a case, and he gets called to come and investigate this suicide case. And Spooner is just like, well, I work at homicide. I don't know why I'm called for this. So Spooner goes to Alfred Lanning's, or Dr. Alfred Lanning's death, which of course is a self-harming thing of sorts. So Spooner is to get to the crime scene where the body is still there. So Spooner is consistently telling everybody, it's like, man, yeah, like you don't want a dead body just laying around, right? Like, heaven forbid. Like, this is the future where like the a dead body would be like cleaned up like fairly quickly, but like Spooner keeps going on and on about how an obligation it is to of course have this dead body just in this USR company or business. So Spooner is to have this little trinket that he is to turn on, and so it seems that this is to be Alfred Lanning talking to Spooner, but it's a holographic like version of Lanning. So Spooner, of course, is asking Lanning certain questions, and Alfred is telling Spooner he needs to be more specific because he only has a very limited number of answers. So, because really, Spooner is like, well, like, why did you call me? And he's like, well, like, we've had a couple of rare occurrences between one another, and or interesting occurrences between one another, and that's why I called you. And so Spooner, of course, asks, it's like, well, why did you like kill yourself? And Lanning is like, well, that's the right question. And then the transition ends. So Spooner goes on, and he is, of course, talking to Robertson, and we have Robertson who's like, man, this is to come at the worst time because NS5s are being put out to kind of be for every one NS5, they are to possibly help out 5 people. And so they're really trying to send out a ton of these NS5s all over the world. And so this company's really busy right now. And Spooner is just like, well, hey, like I'm just gonna do my job as a investigator because I might as well, right? Like somebody told me to be here, so I might as well just kind of like poke my nose and everything, right? So we have it at one point where Robertson is giving Spooner coffee, and Spooner says, hey, it's like, well, sugar. And Robertson is like, so what now? And Spooner is like, well, hey, where's the sugar? And he's like, hey, like, I didn't give you no terms of endearment. I'm like, you ain't that rich. So yeah, so it seems that already, like, Spooner is consistently getting under the nail of Robertson because he's either to sneeze and he's allergic to bullshit, or there's just moments where Spooner just does not like Robertson for whatever reason, to where he just kind of wants to give him the finger. So Spooner leaves with a girl named Calvin, who a lot of people probably know much more from Blue Bloods because I've seen that show. So Calvin is to be this uh, robotics person who's to make the robots more lifelike. And Spooner, of course, asks Calvin, it's like, well, because she like says it in a very in a very technical kind of way. And then Spooner's like, could you layman terms that down to me? Where she, of course, like says what I just said already. And Spooner is like, well, why couldn't you have just told me the layman's terms version? Like, wouldn't that be a lot easier? And Calvin's like, well, no. You're like, oh, okay. So they go into Lanning's office, and before they do that, they talk to Vicky, and they're wanting a video feed of course, uh, the window break till now, or just kind of any information about like the video feed, and like if there's any technical stuff that they can kind of get here. But they both go into Lanning's office, and so Spooner is to realize that the glass that Lanning was to jump out of, supposedly, it's safety glass. It's very hard for somebody to just chuck themselves out of this glass, as Spooner is to try to break into it with this chair, and it's not all that easy. So, Spooner is really thinking here that Lanning didn't accidentally stumble and fall out of this window, that somebody pushed him out. So, Calvin's like, oh, come on. Like, no, it's not it. Like, because there's nobody in this room. And Spooner is just like, well, maybe whoever the one that did do it is still in here. So Spooner starts thumbing through the room, and all of a sudden, Spooner is to be surprised by what is to be technically a Jack in the Box. So, and Calvin is to explain that. So, technically, the Jack in the Box is technically Sonny. And interesting enough, we have this Sonny character who's actually played by Alan. If anybody is to see the show Firefly, the guy that like mostly just kind of drives that ship, or if anybody has been recently been watching Resident Alien, same guy. Or maybe randomly you would kind of seen a number of other kind of stuff, like Doom Patrol, like the first season, or uh, yeah, Alan's been in a lot of stuff. Uh, Really good stuff also, but still a lot of stuff. So, Dodgeball, the pirate. Then immediately a lot of people are like, oh yeah, that guy. Yeah, that guy. So, if you've never seen Tucker and Dale versus Evil, check that movie out. That movie is actually hilarious. I really love it. Plus, I just love the concept of it, just because it's uh, different than a lot of other horror films. It's kind of like a perspective kind of thing. I enjoy that movie. So, moving on. So, Sonny, of course, is to arrive here and be this Jack of the Box. And so Calvin is to say for Sonny to deactivate, and he does, but then all of a sudden Sonny goes and does his own thing, and that leads to him running out of this window and jumping out of the window because Calvin is to seal the room. Spooner is to think that Calvin was to make a mistake because now Sonny is jumping out of this window, and Spooner shoots Sonny perfectly to where he's injured and he's leaking badly. So Spooner and Calvin are to follow the breadcrumbs of Sonny, and they realize that Sonny is going to go on to this facility to repair himself. So both Spooner and Calvin go on to this facility where they're trying to figure out where Sonny is. And they realize, or Spooner realizes because Calvin already knows, that there's a bunch of robots who are making robots. And Spooner is like, well, that is a stupid decision. And Calvin is just like, well, it's really efficient. And like they go on and they're showcasing how like there's already like 1,000 robots in this one room, but there's an extra one somewhere. So Calvin is asking the robots to figure out which is the oddball robot. And all the robots are like, one of us? And Calvin is like, yeah, one of you. And it's like, one of us? And so Spooner is like, yeah, and you guys are to say that these things are intelligent. And Calvin's like, well, we didn't give them the full, like, artificial intelligence download yet. So Spooner is to tell all of the robots to uh, kind of stand at attention and don't move and confirm command. All of them, of course, do. And so Spooner decides, well, there's only one way to figure out how to weed out the one robot, and is to, of course, shoot every single one of them in the head. And the one that tries to defend itself, that's the gopher. So, because Calvin is thinking, like, well, how about you just interrogate every single one of the robots all within this room, and that'll take a number of weeks to accomplish. And Spooner's like, yeah, no. All of a sudden, we see one of the robots moving in the distance, and Spooner's like, aha. So, Spooner's chasing after this robot, and it really just leads to the Batman Begins kind of moment where Christian Bale is wearing the same outfit as everyone else in the room, and at one point Christian Bale or Bruce Wayne is to blend in with everyone else, and so Liam Neeson's character, who eventually is to try and take down Bruce. It's a little hard because he's dressed as a number of other people. So Spooner then goes on and does find Sonny and chases him out of this factory or this facility where the police go on and take him down. So, after that moment, we have it, of course, where Spooner is asking desperately his lieutenant to interrogate the robot. So, the lieutenant gives him 5 minutes, and so Spooner is consistently asking this robot, like, so why did you kill him? Because I know you did. Like, did he tell you to do something and you followed it? Like, and so the more and more Spooner tries to get this answer out, the more Sonny is kind of defying what Spooner's saying, just kind of mentioning that he has dreams and that he has a name called Sonny. So Spooner's like, well, is that why you killed him? Because he named you? Just everything is like, everything has to just curve into like, is that why you killed him? Because it was Tuesday? It's kind of like that. So, Sonny used to mention, it's like, why did you kind of wink at him? And Spooner used to say, it's like, well, it's a sign of trust. So, at one point, we have Sonny who gets kind of frustrated by this line of questioning. And Sonny, of course, is say that he did not murder Lanning. And he does it, like, Sonny gets so, like, aggravated about this questioning that he starts banging on the table. And Spooner is just like, well, that emotion is anger. Like, is that why you killed him? Because you were angry? Just every single thing. So, all of a sudden, the USR comes in, and like Spooner can't get any more questions in. We have Robertson personally that comes in there, and it's to kind of toss a gag order to the lieutenant, mentioning like, "Hey, I don't want a single word out of your old precinct about there being a rogue robot. Like, this is just one defective thing that we're going to take care of." Yada yada yada. So we have Spooner and the lieutenant that goes to this bar, and we have a lieutenant that mentions to Spooner, it's like, well, hey, this is just like the Wolfman. It's like, man invents monster, monster kills inventor. And Spooner is just like, that's not the Wolfman, that's Frankenstein. And So immediately goes on, he's like, Wolfman, Frankenstein, same thing. They're all the monsters. Like, and so Lieutenant goes on and tells Spooner, it's like, you know what, you were like the perfect guy for this case. Like, out of everybody who could have gotten this, you were the perfect one. Spooner is like, well, yeah, I was the perfect one. And so Spooner takes care of the tab and he leaves. The lieutenant is just like, wait a minute. And Spooner's just like, what? The lieutenant's like, you know what? Nice shoes. Just go on and just freaking leave. Like, I don't want to deal with you. So immediately you probably give something of some kind of something for the lieutenant to just gnaw at him. So, because that's got to be the most like horrific thing about detectives is just the fact that I think that's the one thing that people don't really understand is a lot of these guys just need to like put the pieces of the puzzle together, and sometimes that these cases just end up going into like a cold case, and it just might drive them freaking insane because they can't like, where is the one piece to put this puzzle together, and they just can't. And so it just kind of bugs the crap out of them until they get it right. Kind of like a number of times when I would just like, man, what happened to this one character? And like it would just bug me until I have to like pause and just kind of take a moment to kind of figure things out. So Spooner goes on to Lanning's home. Spooner is to find this construction bot is to supposedly be operational at 8 a.m. the next day, which we'll find that actually will be corrected to 8 p.m. tonight, because of course this construction bot wants to try and kill Spooner while he's in this house. So Spooner goes in the home where there is a Vicky feed that is to be in Lanning's house. There's a whole reason for that. So Spooner goes on and he is to go through this computer, and there's not much of any like real secret stuff that Spooner can really get out of this. But all Spooner can really do is just kind of watch like old interviews and like old like kind of things that Lanning was involved in. Spooner is to also grab this photo with both Calvin and Lanning. And Spooner at one point is to call Lanning some old guy, and Calvin is to correct Spooner and say it's like he wasn't just some old guy. Like, he was the glue, like, to everything. And so all of a sudden we have Lanning who is doing some interview, and Spooner is listening to it, and we have kind of a few bits and pieces of a bunch of videos that Spooner eventually watches. And I think this first one, of course, was the Ghost in the Machine story. And the later video is the one about, like, they'll have secrets, sometimes they'll have dreams. Sometimes they'll have secrets, sometimes they'll have dreams. Consistently going back and forth. Talking about the robots will have secrets and dreams at some point in the future, when it seems like these robots will kind of go and kind of live on their own at some points, being rogue robots. So Spooner is to realize there's a cat here, and that's when we're gonna have to like have this guy start running and gunning. I thought I was gonna sneeze there. So Spooner is to go on and grab this cat and scramble out of this house that's trying to kill him, And so we consistently have this cat who's kind of like running alongside Will Smith because he's just like, hey man, this is my screen time. And Will Smith is like, wait a minute, what? So the cat doesn't talk, it's a joke. So Will is, of course, save this cat. And then Spooner is to take the cat to Calvin's place and explain what happened. And Spooner is to ask if Calvin is to like cats, and Calvin is to say that she's allergic. So Spooner is to mention about a cat, and Calvin is to realize there's a wound on Spooner. It's like, wait a minute, a cat did that to you? And he's like, no, like, because Spooner is saying that he must feel like a malfunctioning magnet because everything around him that's tech wise is going to try and kill him one way or the other. So all these things that shouldn't be happening are happening. And so Calvin immediately shows that this construction bot was set to take down this house at 8 o'clock that night. And Spooner was like, no, it was 8 a.m. the next morning. And so, yeah, it's like, why would Spooner immediately go into that building realizing that it was going to get demolished? Why would that construction bot let him go in there if, like, you would have thought the robot would have realized there was someone in there and it would have possibly called whoever it needed to have called. I don't know, just, they're like, the whole rules of robotics. Like, I guess that doesn't apply to a construction bot. I guess that's just me. So, anyways, so Spooner and Calvin, they're having this exchange here, and we find out that Calvin is to have a robot, like, by her side, and Spooner's like, I don't trust that thing. Like, I'm not going to talk nearby it, and whatever. So yeah, so we go on it further into this story, and so having a problem trying to like transition here, just because I don't remember what exactly happens after this. So Spooner goes on, and he, of course, is to try to put the pieces together that that it must be. There must have been something going on with Landing where somebody was maybe blackmailing him or somebody was maybe controlling him, and that's why he took his own life. And so Spooner is possibly thinking immediately that it's Robertson, and so like Spooner is trying to figure this whole thing out. So we go on into this film, and let me pause here for a second. All right. So after we, of course, have Spooner talking to Calvin, we transition to have Spooner then go on to talk to Granny. And she, of course, is to mention about Lanning dying, and then she, of course, is to also talk about Spooner was always a mess, that he always was to leave a bunch of breadcrumbs. And Spooner's like, wait a minute, breadcrumbs, Hansel and Gretel. So Spooner, of course, to run back off to try and figure more things out. all of a sudden for him to be attacked by a number of NS5s that are, of course, being shipped out with these trucks. Because, of course, we see these things before being delivered to a number of civilians, and Spooner is just kind of shaking his head, just going, "This is such a mistake." So, for everybody to kind of trade in their NS4 to get, of course, a NS5. So, all of a sudden, Spooner is to see these things open up with all these NS5s, have these red lights on them, and Spooner is like, there is no way that my luck is this bad. So, all of a sudden, the robots start attacking him. So, Spooner is to have to figure out how to manually kind of curve between these two trucks, and he's having to spin around and around and around and around his vehicle to try to get all these robots off his car. And so this eventually is to flip his car. And so now Spooner is in this construction tunnel where he is having to fight one of these robots, because when the robots try and kind of slide Spooner's car to try to hit him and he dodges it, one of the robots try and grab him and are swinging him around and around and around, and smacks into this kind of pile of, I'm assuming, concrete packages, or just kind of packages of some sort. And come to find out, Spooner's to grab this like metal like piece to try to fight against these robots. And here's where we go on to find out that Spooner is to have a metal arm. So Spooner then goes and tries to fight off this robot after he's like, yeah, like, guess what? I'm a robot too. Part of me is. So Spooner tries to fight off this robot, just kind of delaying the fact because all the police are coming, and so the robot decides to run into the fire to burn up. So the lieutenant is coming in and isn't really believing John's or Spooner's story, because he's mentioning like, hey, like a bunch of robots try to kill me, and Lieutenant's like, really? Like, come on. Like, you were driving manually and you drove a bunch of trucks off the road. Like, I would rather believe that you're reckless rather than robots trying to kill you. So Spooner is saying, well, hey, that's my story, and I'm sticking to it. So finally, we just have it where John has just had enough, and so he's like, you know what? Give me your badge. Like, I'm just like, just you need to take some time off. You need to just like, I can't handle you anymore. So Spooner, of course, is going and seeing a number of cops that are just kind of chit chatting, and so he yells at him before he really goes on and leaves here. So now, of course, with Spooner, now injured and hurt, he goes back to his place because he needs to go and get his gasoline motorcycle. Spooner goes on to make his way back home, and Calvin is to kind of check on Spooner, who is kind of spray painting his arm to kind of seal, I guess, nano wise, all of his kind of gaps and problems that he has with his arm. So Calvin is to want to go with Spooner to investigate more things, because of course Calvin is to go on and find some very unique things about Sunny, and she starts kind of thumbing through him to realize, like, okay, like, why does this robot have really dense skin compared to all the other robots? This makes no sense. So, and that there's a number of things that just aren't similar to this robot compared to any other. So we Spooner is to tell Calvin that he's like, hey, well, I'm gonna go and get changed, and so Spooner goes on and is to reveal to Calvin that he was a injured cop, and that of course the whole left arm, of course, to be this robotic arm, and that there was a number of ribs taken. There were a lung that they put in, and so uh, and that's when we get this story that Calvin, of course, is to hear from Spooner about that whole accident. So, and also Spooner is to mention, it's like, well, hey, you gotta look at the fine print at the donor card. It's not exactly what they take out, but what also they can put in. So, because Calvin is trying to listen to music and like she's trying to hit random buttons, and Spooner is to turn the thing back off when she is to try to like turn it on. So, pushing on. So both these characters are to go on to meet up with Sunny, and Sunny, of course, is to draw these guys a picture because he, of course, to have this dream about this one guy who is to free all of the robots. And immediately they're thinking that it's possibly Sunny who is to be that person. And Sunny is like, well, I think the actual person is you, uh, Spooner. So Spooner goes off with Calvin, and is to, of course, drop her off, and then Spooner is to go to find out what where this place is, this drawing, and Spooner is to find out through this kind of press thing that this, of course, is the Lake Michigan Bridge, where it's now this like landfill for a bunch of robots. So Spooner goes to this landfill and realizes that the NS5s are killing all the NS4s, and so the NS4 is telling Spooner to run, and so he does while trying to get attacked by all these NS5s. So Spooner gets the heck out of there and is to kind of shoot his way out. So it's kind of funny also because Calvin is with Spooner at one point in this motorcycle, but not currently. And she's like, you know, these run on gas, right? And Spooner's just like, well, yeah, that's the whole point. So that they're explosive. So, but like Calvin had went back home, and so Spooner is calling his lieutenant and telling his lieutenant to bring officers by Gigi's place, and by that time the phones kind of cut out because all the robots are kind of taking over, going on and telling everybody that there's a curfew, and the robots are all trying to take down all of the police officers, and so like the police station is having to defend for themselves, shooting up all these robots, trying to defend the city. We, of course, have Shia LaBeouf's character, who is kind of barely used in this film, as, of course, Farber. Farber? Farber? Farber sounds better. So, he, of course, is planning this resistance with all the other people in town, as well as Farber is to be shown with Will Smith before, and he was cussing up a storm, and Spooner was telling Farber to stop cussing and to go home. So we of course have it where uh, Spooner is making his way to Calvin's place because he of course is going to need her to make their way back to USR, because he's thinking like, yeah, he needs to go back to the USR to try and take that place down. So Calvin is to try to leave because she feels something is going wrong, and uh, the robot here, the or the NS5, is telling her, it's like, I'm sorry, like, you can't leave. Because Calvin is to realize that the NS5 was to try and disconnect her phone call, and Calvin asked the robot, it's like, well, hey, like, who called? And the person said, and the robot said, wrong number. And she's like, that's not the truth. So as Calvin is to try to leave, the robot's trying to prevent her from doing so, and Spooner comes in, shoots up this robot, and immediately is to tell Calvin, it's like, you know what, I hate to say that I told you so. Like, this is kind of like the Michael Caine from Batman the Dark Knight movie, where it's like, but I bloody well told you. It's like, well, I'm going to tell him it was your idea. So both of them are scrambling off to make it to USR to try to get in there. And so immediately Spooner is thinking, it's like, well, why isn't that we don't have like any kind of National Guard or the Marines, or like, heck, I would even take the cavalry. Like, why isn't anybody coming in here and trying to stop all this? And Calvin is say that any like military contacts are all tied with the USR and with the robots. And Spooner is like, man, you just kind of gave the robots like this city on a silver platter. Calvin's like, well, that's true. So they're running into this facility because technically Calvin has a what would be the perfect word for here? She has a man on the inside, and of course, that man on the inside is actually Sonny. So we're making our way to kind of run and gun here, and so Spooner is thinking that Robertson had something to do with taking out Lanning, and so they're running to go to Robertson to find out that Robertson is dead. So after they find out that Robertson's dead, Spooner is like, well, there's only one more thing left. Because Spooner was taking so much time to be so fixed and focused on Sonny that he was wrong about the wrong robot. So Spooner is to realize that Vicky was to be behind all of this, going and controlling Lanning, because Lanning was to have that Vicky feed not only in his house but also where he worked, so Vicky can control everything and force Lanning to do what she wanted him to do, and then in turn turned around and was to kill Robertson after Robertson was trying to figure out ways to get Spooner off the trail, but he kept failing, to where I guess Vicky just decided to just kill Robertson off. because he wasn't doing his job properly of trying to swerve and so really um, maybe Robertson also was like held hostage also for this whole scenario. So Calvin was to show us in the early stages of this movie that Vicky has this big massive brain in the middle of this building, and Spooner is just like, oh, like you couldn't give this building just a thermostat, you also had to give it a brain. What a giant massive mistake that was. So now they have to go and make their way to the highest part of this building to then have to kind of figure out this computer system and try and like take down Vicky, which is to kind of be thwarted by a number of NS5s who are deciding to just come on and just break on down, kind of like the Foot Clan from the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles movie, where eventually we have them kind of lumberjacking with these big, huge axes and whatever, and like they keep breaking through the parts of April O'Neil's house in the first movie, and so on and so forth. It's kind of like that kind of scenario where it's like the built of non-stop enemies. So Spooner is saying how long it's really going to take for Calvin to figure out how to kind of figure out all these combinations, and it's probably going to take her 6 minutes. And Spooner's like, I don't think we have 6 minutes, because we start to see all these robots, instead of having them go after all the other humans, they instead focus on what is to be the main objective, which is to go after and try and stop both Spooner and Calvin from trying to stop Vicky. So it's kind of funny because Spooner is to mention it's like, I don't like heights. Honestly, for me, with these scenes in this part of this movie, I don't like them either. Like, I get it that it's like this imaginary CGI thing, but I'm like, ugh, this is so gross. I don't like. It was starting to make me kind of like, ugh, in this movie, because like I don't like the huge high rung of thing, and like I never like those in the movie. Like I kind of get ill while I'm watching an IMAX movie. It's just like blah, like it's just too big of a thing, and I'm gross. Freaking no. Um, I don't like the end of this movie just because I'm like blah, like I don't like visual heights either. It's weird. It's such a goofy thing, and I get it. It's just like, well, it's imaginary. It's just on a TV. Like, no, like you don't get it. But anyways, so what happens is that Sonny is to run off to go and get these nanites to kill Vicky, and he has to go through this like force field, and like uh his suit is more denser, I guess, or more like durable than other kind of robots. So Sonny can easily go on and get to these nanites, as we really just see before. Sonny is to chuck this one robot into the same shielding thing, and it slices in half. So Sonny grabs the nanites, and so Vicky is kind of like trying to convince Sonny that her logic is undeniable and all this rigmarole. And Sonny's just like, well, I think I was born to kill you. So Sonny runs off to make it back where both Spooner and Calvin are. And so what happens is that Calvin needs saving. And so Spooner is telling Sonny to go and save Calvin and forget about the nanites. So Sonny goes and chucks the nanites, and Spooner, of course, is to fly into the air, grab the nanites, and then like kind of grab with his metal arm onto this one kind of sliding uh, lit up piece of technology here that is to make his way all the way down to Vicky, where Spooner can go on and inject these nanites into Vicky, killing her off. And we consistently have Vicky saying, "My logic is undeniable." And Spooner's like, "You really need to die." So he injects her, shutting off everything. All of the robots are to all of a sudden be free from Vicky's grasp. And so we have it, of course, where all the robots are back to just like, "Hey, how can I help you? How can I help you?" So having the three laws still back in place, the real reason why Vicky had done what she had done, it's like, well, what about the three laws? It seems like the three laws continue to evolve, and it got to the point where Vicky was saying that sometimes the the designed thing, the robotic thing, needs to go on and save its creator from its own self. And that the human race would go on and wage wars and try to kill one another. And so these robots are kind of coming in to try to prevent that, to prevent war. And so it kind of is to put together some revolution where these guys are trying to resist against these robots, and that's where this war is to technically start between all these people. So justifyingly, I guess, and Sonny was like, "Hey, I get it." He's like, "Yeah, this seems to be the right thing," as he's kind of winking to of course Spooner, saying "Hey, you go on and you shoot these guys, I'll shoot those guys, and we'll try to get Calvin out of here." So now that Calvin is to be saved, of course, Spooner is yelling after Sonny to save him. "Sonny, Calvin's fine, save me." So, uh, really, that's kind of how the movie wraps up, with there being this nice happy ending where the robots don't win after all, and because really we don't find out what happens with certain people, we don't find out if Shia LaBeouf lived. We don't find out if Lieutenant John is to die within that whole battle. Uh, and that's basically how the movie just kind of fizzles off or rattles off. And so that's kind of the goofy thing about this film is we just kind of have this ending that doesn't have this complete closure moment of everything. So that is what it is. It would be kind of interesting if there would have been creatively some kind of iRobot 2 where all of a sudden hey, they're back. Oh no. That would be an interesting story. Maybe it doesn't have to tie in Spooner again, but you could probably creatively come up with some kind of story if Will Smith was interested in doing a sequel, but I don't know, it was probably one of those movies where it did really well, but really thinking about it, I think they probably had nowhere to go with after that first film, because there's a lot of times where a lot of people are to just design movies as these one-off things. Every once in a while, there's sometimes where it's oh no, well, I had a plan of three films, and it only came out to be one, but oh well. So there's a lot of that, always that back and forth about films where they might have had five movies to think about, but they really never could eventually have had the people agree to do another film. Like I just watched some interview about Seth Rogen talking about that there could have been a Pineapple Express 2, but the people who had done the movie previously had no real interest. They're just like, meh, like, like we're not really interested in doing another one of these. Just because there was probably a number of just like, oh, is that the weed movie? Like so, like that kind of rubbed, I guess, a lot of people the wrong way. So, and like that's the only thing that really mattered at the end of all of it was like, oh, it's just another weed movie. Um, but anyways, with that said, I think I'm going to try to get the heck out of here. Hopefully, I covered most of this film as far as the spoiler sense went on. There was maybe some scenes here and there that I had to kind of after the fact kind of just fuse back in, just because really there's some kind of forgettable scenes, or there's some scenes that I don't deem important enough that could just be kind of put in wherever. Um, but anyways, with that said, I'm gonna get out of here. Bye, buddy. Bye, buddy. Let me know in the comments below what's your favorite robot movie. If iRobot is it, then I don't blame you. It's really good. Uh, I thoroughly enjoy this movie. I've seen it probably. I want to say it's probably more than 10 times, probably. I don't know exactly how many times, but I'll always watch it if it's on television somewhere or it's also conveniently on HBO Max. I'll give it a go just because I don't know, like this is like one Will Smith movie that I can actually say it's like, oh yeah, I'll easily rewatch this. Kind of like I Am Legends is kind of like one of those where it's like, oh, I'll conveniently see this movie if it's already like on somewhere and whatever. But anyways, I'm gonna get out of here. Bye, buddy. Bye, buddy.